Despite finding very little of value and perhaps taking personal offense to the first season, here I am again watching the second season of Kanojo Okarishimasu, or Rent a Girlfriend. I'm watching it only because the girls are hot. Because one of the other days I was on Danboru and I was browsing shit and I saw some official art for this show, and I'm like, damn, even the official art is fucking great. So I decided to watch the second season because of that. However, right now I'm watching episode 14, which is second season episode 2, and there was a couple lines that kind of inspired me to turn on a camera and start talking about the possibility that this show might actually, or at the very least unintentionally, be providing some fascinating commentary that is dangerously based. But first, I want to talk a little bit about love capitalism. Love capitalism is this idea that was coined by some other Japanese lad. It might not have necessarily been Japanese, but I believe it's Renai Shihon Shugi in Japanese. If that's not correct, I'll put it up on screen. Um, but it's this idea that that romance, like, or I guess like various economic principles can be applied to romance, and this is generally done in the same way that incels would in like modern 4chan culture and whatnot. It was like proto incels, let's say, were these like angry Japanese guys saying how money would buy love, right? And that sounds suspiciously familiar with what we're seeing in Kanojo Karishimasu, but I want to take a step back and talk a little bit about the history of love capitalism slash Renai Shihon Shugi. The person who I guess kind of ran with it the most, it would be Honda Toru, who I've talked about a bit before in various other places, but essentially the TLDR is that he was this lad who advocated for 2D romance and was staunchly opposed to the whole modern romance, just in general, right? Um, and for I guess the concept of love capitalism, or at least the way he explained it, is the reason why guys like him will inherently fail at romance, and you kind of have to play a game. It's kind of what it is, and the way he saw it, especially when he was growing up and during the bubble economy of Japan during the 80s and 90s, mostly during the 80s, early 90s, but it kind of fell off after the bubble burst. But this was a period where there was a lot of economic growth within Japan, and there was a lot of people with spending power that they didn't have beforehand. And especially during, like, this was the time when there was a lot of stuff happening, and it was a very consumerist culture because a lot of people had a disposable income. So Honda was viewed this as love capitalism, which was the idea that people with money were the ones who were able to afford a girlfriend, or at least afford love, or at least, at the very least, get your foot in the door, because there was a lot of things that you would have to prove beforehand if you wanted to get into the dating market, or at least what he perceived as a modern dating market, which was to have the nice clothes, the cool car, uh, and once you get those things, then you're able to like get access to the whole love uh, cesspool or whatever. And without those things, you would have a lot of trouble doing so, especially during the times I suppose like upper middle class Japanese young adult person, which he was not. He was a hikikomori because he dropped out of high school. So obviously he did not have those things, whereas the people who graduated from university did. Like a traditional like business or whatever um, degree would get you into a job, then you would have a decent job at a good company or whatever. You would be having your income, and then you would be able to buy your fancy watches and clothes and shit. Um, which is essentially what happened in stories like Densho Otoko, where the character in that show uh, started like completely disregard. I could rant about Densho Otoko for a while, but essentially he cleaned up his image and attempted to LARP as a Ryaju to get the or not necessarily LARP, but he intentionally tried to be a Ryaju to get uh, to steal the heart of a 3D PD, and the way he did that was by getting a haircut, freshening up image, learning fashion, discarding otaku goods and whatnot. Um, my actual opinions of that are relegated to my Love is Dead, Long Live the Otaku article. I believe there's a separate section for that. But that's essentially what Honda would have had to do. Instead, he rejected that path. Like, he could have very well decided to start working, get a decent job somewhere, like at a kombini, or just any company, factory, doing pencil pushing, whatever. And he could have used the money that he earned from that to start getting the things that would perceive you as a successful person, or like a cleaned up person, the modern man, if you will. But instead, he rejected those things, hung out in his room, and watched Sailor Moon and Evangelion and whatnot, and spent a copious amount of time playing eroge and having a waifu. And he saw this as like a divide between two sides of like masculinity. Like, there was one side that was the person who wanted to play the game, and then there was other person who either couldn't or didn't want to, and he saw this as a problem, and at least wanted to talk about it. And the thing about love capitalism is that, like, presented to anyone, like if I go on the street and I ask someone, what do you think about love capitalism, they're gonna think it's retarded. But why are they gonna think it's retarded? Because the thing is that no matter how I look at it, it's your guys' fault that love capitalism is real, because it is. It's unironically real. And there was this idea that I had for a while. I might have talked about it before in a video, somewhere, someplace. But it's the idea of romance as an investment. And I think I was telling someone I knew IRL this before, and they looked at me with like cross-eyed, like, are you actually saying that? And I was taken aback because everything I was saying seemed logical to me. So I guess I'll talk about it and expand upon it, and maybe I won't sound as insane to other internet people. But the idea is that, like, getting into any relationship, or just in general, getting into thing is an investment, because you, at the very least, you have to invest time into something. For example, if you want to get into a new hobby, or you want to get into a new franchise, like media property or whatever, you're going to have to, at the very least, invest time learning about it, or just the base level watching it, or spending time working through it. Like, if I really want to get into, what's a thing I could get into? Like, I don't know, PlayStation portable games. I would have to, at the very least, invest time learning about it and setting up an emulator or something. And that holds true for IRL relationships, and then more so with romance as well. Because let's say you want to be friends with someone, you're going to have to, at the very least, spend a decent amount of time getting to know them as a person before you can even consider them as a friend. So there is a time investment with that. However, with romance, there's also a bit of monetary and emotional investment required. And I was explaining it as, like, if you're getting into a relationship with someone, it's like an investment, like you're investing in a stock. Or the way I think about it more too is like you're investing within, like, a car or a computer, that it's this thing that you're building up and you're personalizing over the years, and you spend a considerable amount of money with it, with the intention of keeping it for a very long time, and it's also something that you care about. And with a relationship, you would be spending a decent amount of time, just like time in general, but also like time spent investing yourself emotionally with this person, as well as just monetary as well. That there is, like, well, not necessarily as direct and transparent as the way it's presented in Kanojo Okade Shimasu, where the main character is essentially paying girls to fall in love with him. Not completely directly, he's doing a roundabout way of doing it, but with like an average relationship. Let's say that you are you and your girlfriend, right? Or you and your boyfriend, whatever, uh, you are in a relationship. What do people in relationships do? They kind of they spend time with each other and they go on dates. And when you go on dates, you spend money and then you buy presents for them. This is not something I think about when I think about like giving stuff to family, because that's something that perhaps uh, escapes this whole idea of investment. But I guess it still holds true with as well, that it's like the gamification of reality, where like I think about Tokimeki Memorial or Persona with the social links, that like especially like in Tokimeki, because I played that one recently. But like when you decide to give a present to someone in the game, you have to think about the personality and think about what what is something that this character would like. Like if the character is someone who likes books, you're obviously going to give them a book about poems, and you're not going to give them a baseball glove or something. So you have to play the game, I guess. And it's interesting to think about too, especially with a lot of these games and in like dating sims, gal game, shoujo games of the 2000s that gamified romance in a way that otaku would understand, but it also sort of perverts the idea of the quote unquote pure idea of romance that was never actually all that pure. But um, with like family as well, like when you're giving something to someone, or at the very least spending time with them, I think of it as like a persona social link, that you decide how you spend your time, and if you're going to spend your time with this person, you're going to get some sort of return in the future. And with like a family member, for example, you're spending time with them partially out of necessity, because they are someone that you live with probably, or at the very least you want them to be there to do something for you in the future, or just to not be a dick to you, I guess, like to be on good terms. Whereas like if you're in a relationship, you're spending time and money with this person for a potential return in the future, which will either be an emotional return, a sexual return, or perhaps just like uh, something a bit more concrete, like a marriage, or you're investing time with this person with the intention of having a family with them in the future. And the ring on the finger is the ultimate investment in the end. And like even just putting that ring on their finger, you have to pay for it if you're a guy. Um, so like in a sense, love capitalism is real, because you have to have spending power to play the game of romance. Because in a perfect world, you wouldn't have to, but that's not really how things work. You need money to do anything. If you don't have any money, you will fall over on the side of the road and die a homeless person. You're kind of fucked otherwise, which is a bit depressing to think about overall. But I find it interesting to see it presented so uh, coarsely, I guess, in Kanojo Okari Shimasu, where like it unflinchingly will present this idea where the main character is paying these girls who are essentially emotional prostitutes to spend time with him and to pretend to be his girlfriend. It was initially out of loneliness, because the guy was fapping in his one room apartment alone in the dark, and he was like, damn, bro, that feel when no GF. So then he decides to download some app and like rent a girlfriend to go on a date with him, and she would pretend to be his girlfriend. Like right here, it's saying, Chizuru is saying, it'd be pointless if I wasn't acting like your ideal girl. To which he rebuttals that, but the point is that he's paying someone to act like his ideal girlfriend, and I guess that's a bit. This will lead to an entirely different tangent. I'm not sure if I want to go down, which is the idea of, um, I guess like idolization of a person, or just like the entire concepts of, uh, like masks and acting a certain way that people would do. Uh, Especially within relationships too, if it's not a seasoned relationship or one that you've spent a lot of time into, you're gonna be uh, I guess working around the other person's idiosyncrasies, where um, for example, like if you ask someone who is clearly like in a bad spot, and you say what's wrong, and they say nothing, um, but you're like, okay, but that's clearly not true. Am I supposed to inquire more, or am I supposed to leave it be? And that's something that someone who like isn't that, I guess, experienced with a lot of those things like I am, or at least like somewhat autistic, would find to be troublesome, like a troublesome situation where you're like, how am I supposed to do this? In a Bishojo game, you'll quick save, you'll select an option, and if it doesn't work out, you just reload the save. But that doesn't work in real life, unfortunately. It's not a game. But a lot of game concepts could work out in the end. But I suppose the point is that I find it interesting how Kanojo Okarishimasu is so blatantly, or perhaps it's most certainly unintentional in the way it's doing it. It's probably just being a funny series for a joke, like, haha, what if this guy paid for a girlfriend, and then like ended up falling in love with her. I'm sure that's been done before with other, like, someone who buys a prostitute and ends up wanting to quote unquote fix her, like, I can fix her, bro. But like the it's just like a microcosm of modern romance, and it's showing the evolution, I suppose, of the idea of love capitalism. And then, because the main character is paying for the girl to be his girlfriend, and we all know that Chizuru is probably going to be the girl who falls in love with him for real at the end. So, it's a roundabout way of doing so, but he's still playing into the idea of love capitalism, except in a very explicit way, that he's like literally giving her money every time they go out on a date. However, if let's say, for the sake of argument, let's say that he wasn't paying her any money, he would still be paying for the dates regardless. So this time he's giving money is the point. Like, regardless of what he's doing, he's still gonna be, if he wants to spend time with Chizuru, even if she was his real girlfriend or she wasn't, he would still be spending money nevertheless. It's just the way he's going about doing it is not necessarily the way a lot of people think is proper. Like, the old way of doing things, like back in my day, boomer talk, which I still don't think, like, this was the problem I had with the first season, is that this guy was such a coon brain loser that he would pay girls to fall in love with him. And I saw this as, like, this guy is exactly what's wrong with, like, the modern male in general, or whatever, or like the whole that feel with no GF mindset that you find yourself within, or at least a lot of young people did, and I found myself in that mindset specifically. I'm sure if I watched this show years ago, I would think differently. However, I saw this as, this guy is so attached to real girls that he's willing to sink so low to do this. It's like paying for a prostitute and then just talking to her. That's kind of what I see this guy as. Like, that's how lonely, that's how addicted to 3D PD he is. But that's not necessarily true. Well, I guess, like, in a sense it is true, but like, I saw this as more of a problem than it actually was. And I just think it's fascinating to think about, because I know I'm 100% overthinking this entire concept of the show. But the idea stands that it's interesting how it's subtly providing commentary on, or at least like reappropriating love capitalism in a more modern lens, and presenting it in a way that wasn't necessarily how it was originally, but the roundabout way of doing it, and the sheer absurdity of the show, as well as the incorporation of modern anime cliches and archetypes, is fascinating. It's utterly fascinating now that I'm spending more time thinking about it. Like, the fact that this show even exists in the state that it does, and the popularity it finds itself within. It's and also the audience it's presenting it to, and then the level of popularity that it has, in spite of a lot of the problems, and then also how it divides the community for different reasons as well. That there's a lot of people who think it's retarded, or think that the characters act really stupid or unrealistic or whatever. And I think that's kind of the point. The point of the show is that it's not supposed to be realistic at all. I mean, you're watching fucking anime, dude. These are 2D girls that you have a picture of as your phone wallpaper, because they're the most ideal girl that you think of, but the author intended them to be not ideal but sort of ideal, and it gets kind of weird. That was unusual ramble, I suppose, but I figured it was worth discussing some of the ideas presented here and overthinking the whole Kanojo Okari Shimasu. I still don't think it's a good show, though I think the girls are incredibly hot. But everybody in the show is stupid, unfortunately. I that said, everything said in this video ramble thing is not. It doesn't hold too much weight since I'm not a manga reader. This could all fall apart later on. But I maybe it was something interesting to discuss. At least like work out and explain a different perspective from someone with that's coming from a different mindset, I guess. In seeing where like how this show can unironically be brilliant if it followed through with some of these ideas that it was unintentionally presenting, or at the very least, I think it does have more merit than I originally thought in the first season. It doesn't make it any more enjoyable, but there's something under the surface there that, regardless of authorial intent, I think is pretty neat and, dare I say, based.